Welcome to the Alia Graphics podcast. Today we have another exciting creator chat lined up. I'm Luke Darlington, a committee member of the Alia Graphic Novels and Comic Group, a fantastic community of volunteers who are passionate about comics and libraries. Before we dive into our conversation with our special guest, as a national group based across the land we call Australia, we'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land and recognizing that sovereignty was never ceded. This has always been and always will be Aboriginal land, and I'd like to personally acknowledge the Jagera and Turrbal people as the traditional custodians of Meerjin, Brisbane, the lands on which we work and learn. We pay our respects to the Jagera and Turrbal people, our elders of past and present, and to all First Nations across the land. We thank them for their rich storytelling, traditions, and art. Today's guest is Lara Carroll, a writer and visual artist. Lara herself describes as a middle-aged, speckly beige woman who loves her family and cats. She's a proud vegetarian. Trade unionism is her guiding principle alongside her passion for yoga. The extended lockdowns brought her back to drawing as a skill she studied 30 years ago. Now she embraces the freedom of midlife, creating art without the pressure of perfectionism. Welcome to the show, Lara.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to meet you and to say hi to everybody who watches the Alia Graphic chats.
Thank you. It must be exciting to get yours up there as well with the others.
Oh, yeah, it's extremely exciting. Yeah.
Especially after an extended period of not creating, well, probably creating, but not drawing or making graphic novels.
Yeah, decades, actually. Yeah. And there was a recent creator chat, I think. I'm not going to say who it was because I'm not too sure I remember exactly who it was, but one of the recent guests on the YouTube videos said that they'd been working away on their own for several years without having much to do with other creators, and so I really identified with that. That's me. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I've tried to create my own graphic novels, and it's a very solo effort. And you can sometimes be very secluded in your own little world that you're trying to create.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. So during COVID, what was it that sparked you to get back into drawing? Was it just boredom, or you saw something and you're like, I can do that?
Oh God, this is such a funny story, kind of terrible story. My partner actually wrote a graphic novel during lockdown. Yeah. So we weren't living together. So in Melbourne, we had these horrible curfews and all these kinds of terrible extra wrinkles on our lockdowns. But when it was possible for him to come over, he would come over in the evenings and sit at the same kitchen table that I'm sitting at now. And, he was making use of the time. And I wasn't quite there. I didn't have the concept and the vision, but I did get out the coloured pencils and I found it so satisfying. It really did me a lot of good to be able to have something where I could get into that flow state, complete a drawing and get that little dopamine hit from finishing something nice. And if only I'd thought of doing this project then, it would have been smart. But no, I didn't start it until the thing that we think of as COVID, even though it's still going, the lockdown period in Melbourne. I didn't think of it until that it was just about finished. Damn it.
That's good. Good use of the time and getting that inspiration back. I know. Yeah. I find drawing can be if I'm having a bad week, but even if I draw something that's not great, putting something onto paper just makes me feel a little bit more relaxed and accomplished. Personally,
yeah, it'd be good if more people knew that, I think. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too wholesome and everything about it, but I do hope that the sometimes actually quite crappy drawing in my book might perhaps send a message on some level to people who are doubting themselves that you can draw things. You just got to you know, set aside that self-critical voice and sit down and do it.
I think that's the
Yeah.
hardest part. That self-critical voice is exceptionally difficult to quiet down. And I've got to admit, I think over time has been the most helpful factor in combating it. You start to learn things about yourself and processes, and you realize it's not as important, but it definitely took ages. I know for me to get it under control and look past like it must be perfect. Now it's like it just be happy when it's done.
So true, so true. There's a lot of things that I feel like I can say to people, particularly young people who might be grappling with a little bit of the, you know, the perfectionist tendency or the performance anxiety. One is that you're never the right person to make the judgment on whether your work is good or not. And sometimes the things that you think of as flaws are actually what give it the personal style and the, you know, the interestingness, and stop it just being robot generated AI slop. So yeah, it's good to, I think, gather people around you who want to see you succeed and who will you know, tell you that your work's great. That's always good. Yeah, but I did a fine art degree as a young person, and got from that ridiculously academic standards, I guess, of drawing that inhibited me from drawing again for a long time. It wasn't time wasted, you know, I did other things, but you know, didn't really need it.
Yes, I did. University can be like, because they've got levels and standards that you need to hit or be proficient at, and sometimes those seem very daunting.
Yeah.
Especially in a group environment.
That's right. That's
heaps
right.
of other artists with you.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to art school with a person who a couple of decades later had they represented Australia in the Venice Biennale. So, you know, there's always someone who's better than you. It's good to learn that early on, because then you can let go of that wish to be best or whatever. And I also think that there's some people who just find the hand-eye stuff, it's easy. They can just draw a correct line that they wanted. If they wanted, they can just draw what they envisage in their head. It comes easily to them. I'm not one of them. But the British artist Henry Moore, he said, I always hung on to this. He said, you know, everybody will do a great drawing as long as you draw a lot. So,
yeah.
you know, yeah.
That's very true. I have tons of sketchbooks. I like recently moved, and they've all been sitting in a box. And I've been like, I should really go through these and have a look at them. But I'm like, no, I don't want to. Like, it'd be cool to see the improvement, but I kind of like knowing that all that past effort is there. It's good to see it visually, but I don't really want to look at it just yet. So with the making of the shrine, your graphic novel, I mean, it takes it's several decades long. When I was reading it was, I think my preconceptions were I was going to be reading something that was going to be a little bit like the Grand Design TV show where, like this is the monument, these are the people that built it, these were the struggles they had throughout it, and that definitely exists throughout the novel. But what I wasn't expecting is over how it transforms over the years, like the culture of Melbourne and the people around it, and just the decades of how it's kind of in the background, the shrine, to everybody, and then the actual lives of everybody. It inspires or, you know, creates friction, which I thought was just like, it kept me engaged throughout. And I was like, damn, I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah, thanks so much, Luke. That's really, really interesting to me to hear, and quite gratifying because, well, for a couple of reasons. So I'm on Wurundjeri country down in Victoria, of course, near where the Shrine of Remembrance is in Melbourne. And you being in Queensland, I have wondered how it will hit with someone who's not from Victoria. Of course, of course, I feel like it's quite Australian stories and they should resonate anyway, but it does have that very local and specific focus. It's really embedded in this place, in this state. But yeah, the idea of it that I had right at the beginning was that it was not just about the actual design and construction of Victoria's War Memorial, although that is really important because it was actually a pretty dramatic story. It took a really long time for them to get this war memorial built. But yeah, you're right. Almost as soon or even before they finished construction, the meaning of it was being remade, and it was contested, and it has remained contested for a long time. The physical fabric of the building has changed quite a bit in the 90 years that the Shrine of Remembrance has existed in Melbourne. So it's always been in flux, which is kind of one of the things that fascinates me about it, because I'm just going to hold up the cover of my book. So if people are not familiar with the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, it is very large and imposing, and it's carved out of granite. And I'm Generation X, and a cousin of mine who grew up within like a 10-minute walk of the Shrine, who's the same generation as me, he said to me that he had always thought that it was just a solid block of stone, like he'd never been inside. So, and it does have that monolithic quality. It's very formal and quite remote, but I do know it very well. And to me, you just have to scratch the surface of it to see that it's really kind of full of life and change, as opposed to how it looks from the outside. So I knew there was a lot of really great social history stories available to be pinned to the way that this monument's meaning has changed over decades. And I think it'll continue to change too.
Well, definitely. Like, history's going to keep going and it's going to be there. So I definitely think it'll change over time.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing I got from it. And after reading it, I had to go do I got to get on Google and look at the website and actually get, I went on the website to get a better view of it, and I was genuinely surprised at how it is a massive block of land that it's on. And it does look imposing, but I guess I read the novel beforehand, and the artwork, your landscape artworks always make it look very friendly and meditative. Like that would be the kind of place you'd go to have a picnic or just relax. So but just zooming in and going inside and having a look around, and on their website doing the virtual tour. This is really cool, especially, I don't know, I don't want to spoil the book, but there are moments where they talk about how the creation of certain aspects of the building is done, and you're like, oh, I know something. I got a little bit of extra knowledge that I can see there, which I thought was very cool. That's what I look for when I've read something, is I can go somewhere and have that, spoiler knowledge. You're like, oh, did you know?
I'm enjoying this conversation because, even though the book is extremely handmade, like everything in it is hand drawn, including all the text. Josh Santos Spirito, a little while ago on his creator chat, he said the only thing on his book that was not hand drawn is the barcode. It's the same on mine. You can't hand draw the barcode. That's too important. You have to get that right. It has to be readable by barcode readers. But even though it is like almost an anti-digital artifact in some ways, this book, at the same time, I was aware that everybody reading a book in 2024 is, just arm's reach from the internet, essentially. And so I wanted to try to just be playful with that and to put things in it, like little invitations here and there for people to extend whatever it was that they were interested in and look things up online, whether it's some obscure bit of pop culture history that people were thinking about in Melbourne in the 30s, or things to do with the building itself, or characters who sort of pass through the book. So now that it's finished and it's published and I have a chance to step back from it, I think I probably could have spelled out a few things a bit more, but of course the internet is always there and people can find things out. I did, and also a lot of people do visit the shrine. I think it has about somewhere between 600,000 and 1 million visitors a year. And so a lot of Australians have been there and have seen it, and will continue to see it. And so they'll bring their own experience of it to the book, hopefully. Yeah.
I think you did a very good job of putting like little Easter egg, maybe unintentional, but little Easter eggs throughout for people to, expand and explore.
That's it. They are Easter eggs. Exactly. Spot on.
Yeah, it's great. Like there'd be like little illustrations, like maybe just throughout for starting of new chapters. Or like use one bit where I think they made like a cake. Was it a cake? And I was like, well, all right, it just kind of stopped me for a brief moment that the person that created the cake took the time to go to the monument, see the monument, and then design his cake. And they have little bits throughout your graphic novel, which you're just, oh, that's really cool that they made this. They got inspired from it, and then they made this from it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super fascinated by, I guess, the broad cultural phenomenon of something like this, like a monument, like a big community monument. So the history of war memorials in Australia is pretty interesting. Not too many. So big community war memorials didn't really exist before the start of the 20th century, and then with the First World War, of course, Australians who died in the First World War, their bodies weren't brought back to Australia. So people felt, and governments felt as well, and councils felt, and ex-service organisations felt that there needed to be community memorials. So they were built in towns and in cities. That sort of thing didn't really exist before the First World War. So they didn't really have models. They didn't really have precedents to follow of how to build them. So I think what they did with the Melbourne War Memorial is they looked to ancient monuments that previous generations had built and that had been treasured by human beings, because that's what they wanted. They wanted to build something that would last a long way into the future. Like, it's kind of science fictional, really. They wanted to build something that's a bit like the monolith in 2001, be discovered again in the future and mean something to people who had lost perhaps all memory of the civilization that this came from. So like the pyramids, like that sort of thing, outliving the generations. So they're really going for that. And also in Australia, as a settler society, didn't have buildings like that. So, there's that real search for sacredness in it. And people, like you mentioned, the models that I drew in my book, when I started to research the history of the shrine, I found, all these people who'd made these incredible models of the shrine, like no one asked them to. In most cases, they'd made models at like a cake, like you mentioned, and there was another guy who made one out of margarine.
Yep, that was the one I was like thinking of. I knew it was something a little bit. It wasn't cake, but it was something a little bit different.
Yeah. But I really related to that because I felt like I'd become sort of possessed by it, and I feel like these people had the same sort of experience. They got possessed by it as well. But I'm over it now. I'm done now.
You're all done.
Yes.
I have it. Like, how much time and research did this take to get off the ground? Like, was there just like a good few years where it was all just research before going into drawing, or is it like doing both at the same time?
It was quite a bit of doing both at the same time. I knew a lot about the Shrine of Remembrance before I started, but I learned much more because I went and looked in archives and, really had questions that I wanted to answer.
The archivist must have loved you for that, right? Like,
yeah, they're great people. They'd get something out and they'd go, oh, this is really beautiful, or this is really interesting. So that always gives you a little lift or a little boost. It took three years of work, and the way that it's organised. This is my first book, Luke, and I learned a lot. I self-published it. And there's a few things that I have learned that I would not do again. But one thing that I congratulate myself on is that I knew that to finish a big project like this, I would have to do it in chunks. So I'd have to give myself that little hit of completion, satisfaction pretty regularly.
mm-hmm.
And so it's done in stories. I think there's 25 different stories of different moments or episodes in the history. And they're, anything from 3 to 12 pages, each of them. So some of them, the ones that I did to begin with, were things that I knew quite well, and the facts weren't in dispute, and I wasn't going to have to do a lot of research, and I could also think about how to present them. And the ones I left till last were the hardest to figure out how to shape them and present them. So that probably wasn't smart. But
that sounds exactly how you should do it. Like, get all the easy things out the way first, and then focus on that hard one and hope you've learned some lessons from the easy ones to make it a bit easier.
Yeah. The other thing about doing it that way, because I didn't do those stories in chronological order, the other good thing about that was I also knew that my drawing style would change and that I'd become more fluent as I went along. So I did them out of sequence so that it wouldn't be an effect where you'd start at it as a reader at the beginning and it would come out the other end with much more sophisticated and competent drawing. No. So, yeah. Look, it was an extremely enjoyable process because I'm a nerd and I loved doing the research.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you've done the whole thing, so we're talking like characters, setting out your panels, doing all your type. That's crazy. Like, that's really difficult. I find like I'd love to pay somebody or know somebody that does it when I do mine, because it takes a lot of time to try and you can draw out your panels and you add your dialogue and all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake. Something's out of whack.
Well, it's an aesthetic. I think it's an aesthetic. And I have so much admiration for, I don't know, let's say someone like Chris Ware, where it's just so clean, but also I love the hand-drawn style. I think I do prefer it because I like to see the touch, that I like to feel like I'm reading something human. But each to their own. But yeah, I did make a lot of mistakes, but I've just left them in. Because why? Why not? I've got the pages here. I'm going to do something absolutely awful and see if I can find probably the worst mistake.
Oh, you want to pinpoint it out for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, because here's the thing: I really don't think it matters.
No,
I'm serious when I say that.
You're probably the only person that notices too, right? Unless there's somebody with a magnifying glass going over it and tallying it up.
The one I'm going to show you, I reckon people will notice this. So this is a chapter about my camera's moving like that because Zoom has done some sort of weird update. I don't know. Anyway, right. This chapter is about when the shrine opened in 1934. There was 10,000 pigeons released off the top, and the newspapers say that there was either a group of boys or one man who was up there all night to look after them. So I've just taken a little bit of liberty there and drawn one little boy
Yeah,
staying up there with the pigeons overnight.
I remember
So
that chapter when we got one kid let 10,000 pigeons go. What a
yeah,
job!
no, that can't possibly be
No,
what happened. But anyway, so what I have done is, so here he is being taken to the shrine with a family friend. Now that steering wheel, that's not the side of the car that steering wheels are on in Australia. And it's never been that way. So I worked that out halfway through drawing this chapter. And then I just moved the steering wheel to the other side of the car for those panels. I didn't go back and correct the other ones because this is a hobby project in a sense. No one, I didn't have an editor to tell me that I had to fix it.
you were your own editor, so you have it all. You had all the power.
Yeah, look, in a sense, to me, I'm going to justify it here. See if this flies. In a way, it's just accepting the imperfections that come with being a human being and doing a project, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah, so
They're just a happy little accident. So
yeah, there's a few things like that I think anyone who wants to find mistakes will find them. But I'm fine. I'm fine with that. I don't mind.
well, we don't want them to find mistakes. We want them to read a very rich story about the history of the shrine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, whatever pleasure people get out of it, I'm happy for that to happen. The shrine is a place where school kids get taken, either in huge groups or in smaller groups. And so certainly in Victoria, I think most school kids will go there. There certainly are like interstate school groups that sometimes go, although not anywhere near to the same extent as what go to the War Memorial in Canberra. That just if they're doing a trip to Melbourne, they might be taken to the shrine. But I really hope that any kids, I've got a 13-year-old, if kids his age or around about that age come across my book, they might kind of see it, just harking back to what you said about how the monument, it's perhaps a little bit imposing or forbidding. I think it's really important that young people feel that they have a sense of ownership and belonging over major places in our community, particularly heritage places. So I really hope that maybe seeing something colourful and inviting like this in their school library or whatever might help them to feel like the shrine's a place where they can have a stake and find it interesting on their own level.
Yeah. Are you hoping, like, maybe in the future when there's a school group that is going to the shrine, that your book is part of a reading they do beforehand? Like that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, I think the way that it's organised into those 25 stories, it lends itself to that. When I get round to it, I've given copies to some of my friends who are Victorian school history teachers, and I'll ask them what they think might be useful. And maybe I'll think about just making some of those stories available on my website, maybe with some teacher notes, see what sort of advice I get, because I think it might be a nice thing for teachers to have access to. Yeah.
If it's anything, I would imagine, like with the library I'm at, I got to admit, our local history, there's no group, but whenever we have a local history event, is by far one of our most popular. So maybe you've got local libraries down there and they have to run a local history event. I imagine that could do very well.
Yeah. Well, I love to meet other people who are interested in local history. And so again, I'm not in any hurry to do this, but I might, see if some community history groups might be interested in a talk at local libraries around Melbourne or country Victoria. I'd love to do that. It's fun.
That's good. Yeah, I think it'll go really. I speak from experience that, like, just because it works at mine doesn't mean it will work at others, but I just know it's one of those kind of events that definitely has been popular with that, like that subject matter. So with the whole project, so you actually got a grant from the City of Melbourne to do it. What was the process for that like?
Well, that was amazing. That was really great. I have applied for grants before for my work in different ways. So I've written grant applications before, but this is the first time I've had a grant for a personal project, and so it wasn't a huge amount of money that they gave me. I don't mind saying it was $8,000, and the book has cost me a lot to produce, but it certainly offset some of those expenses. But what it also did for me was it gave me a structure. Like, I had to do a proper budget, figure out how much things were going to cost. I had to really articulate in the grant application what I wanted the book to be and what I wanted it to do. And then I had to stick to the timelines that I'd promised the City of Melbourne that I would have. And they definitely supported production of the book, but because of the way that the City of Melbourne Arts Grants program works, there needs to be a public outcome that people can attend. And so that had to be a book launch. So I had to have a proper book launch and everything, which I did enjoy, but I was a bit nerve-wracked by it as well. But no, it was really, really terrific to have that responsibility. And one of the things that was really, really good about having that external authority that sponsor that I had promised certain things to was they had very clear rules about ethical engagement with Aboriginal people. And as you know, having read the book, there are multiple stories in there to do with Aboriginal people's experience in military service and around war memorials. And so I would have tried to be as ethical as I could with that anyway. But they had very clear guidelines about how consultation had to happen. And that was really good because it made me feel like I was doing it properly, which was important to me. So it was great having that support. Again, self-publishing, it can be quite lonely, not having, someone to check that you're doing everything correctly. But City of Melbourne's creative program was really good. They have supported other graphic novels too. I believe they might have supported Miranda Burton's book Underground, or perhaps a different book of hers. I'm not sure, but yeah, they're really great.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Did you go well with your deadlines? Were you able to, you didn't miss any, or you just had a real cram session where oh no, it's due, got to get X amount of pages done?
I actually did have a pretty tight deadline to get it done, to do with local government elections, because it was so complicated. Oh my God. Yeah. So I just had to get it done so that I could deliver that event before the council election, which is in a few weeks. So anyway, meant that I got it done. I'd probably still be sitting here drawing it otherwise.
So it's a good thing that strict deadline, government involvement got you over the line in time.
Yeah.
It's good that they're super supportive as well.
Yeah, it is good. Yeah. I mean, the other thing about applying for a grant is that you have to get a letter of support, in fact, multiple letters of support from industry people, experts. And so that is another thing where you have to sort of do a proof of concept type of activity. You've got to show your work to someone and ask them to write a letter supporting your project. And that's all really good in terms of shaping you up and making you realise that what you're actually aiming for is a real book out in the world that people are going to read, not just your mates on Instagram.
Did you have to go out and find people like that, or do you already have a decent network that you could have relied on?
Yeah, in this case, I did ask people who were within my network, but I am planning to do a couple more graphic novels. I'm not sick of it yet. And for the next one, I will definitely seek letters of support from people who aren't my buddies. Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Like getting, yeah,
Yes.
getting out there, asking those people, can you
Yeah.
help me? This is my idea, and seeing how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask for a little bit more money next time when I ask for a grant. I mean, I did this book in my own time and at home, and you know, I don't mind being cloistered at home and drawing. It's fine. It's a fun thing to do. But I probably should have asked for a bit more money, just on the principle of valuing your own work, you know, not underselling it, I guess.
Did you have like, was it maybe that gap hiatus that you had with your art that might have made you ask for, didn't realize how much it was going to cost, or just after doing it, you like realized how much time it took?
I didn't. It's not so much the time; it was actually the expenses. Like, I didn't realize that printing a book, or indeed getting artwork professionally scanned, was going to be quite as costly as it turned out to be. I had the book printed and manufactured in Australia, which I think is a good thing, but you know, it's expensive. But it's not so much, you know, to pay myself more or whatever, just to be less out of pocket on it. That's all.
Was the printing the most expensive of the?
Printing was expensive. I hadn't really budgeted anywhere near enough money for the digital imaging. So being an amateur at making books, I did a few things that, you know, they're not outrageously unusual. There are plenty of other comics creators and graphic novelists who hand do their artwork and don't necessarily use a stylus and a tablet and do it digital. But one of the things that I did was, so all of these speech bubbles. What the digital imaging studio did was they had to go over all of those individually and change the color profile to just pure black instead of CYMK color, because it would have perhaps been slightly blurry.
Oh, wow. That would have been a lot of work.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. That poor guy at that studio. Yeah, I mean, he was lovely about it, but yeah, I think they were glad when I finally finished my book.
Got to that last page and like, yes, we've done it.
Yeah.
And how did you feel at the end result when you've got it physically? Is it like, I don't know, like this uplifting moment of like, oh my God, look at it. It's real. It's tactile.
That's been a bit of a slow burn to get that, because when it actually was delivered to me, I got 1,000 copies and they were delivered to me on a pallet to my block of flats where I live.
Oh, you're not like at the top level, are you?
Yes.
Oh, just adding the extra.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So you know, so that was, I mean, that's just what DIY is. It just involves stuff like that. It's fun. It's fine. It's good exercise.
I've had to say you would have strong glutes after that and some upper back.
Yeah. But so when they first arrived, I was just glad that they'd sent me my books and not an Ottolenghi cookbook or something by mistake, that they'd sent me my actual books. And then I had to do this really pathetic thing for about a week where I just carry it around with me, like
Mm.
I took it to bed with me, like literally to bed, because yeah, here's my book. Finally, a real book, not just all these pieces of paper after all this time. So yeah, it took me just under 3 years, which I know is actually not that long to complete a 176-page hand-drawn graphic novel with a lot of research in it and interviewing people and stuff. So, but it felt like a long time to me because I like instant gratification. But and you know what? Various people who've now read it have sent me the most lovely comments on it, and they've always said that they finished it in one sitting. And I just think, oh my God, really?
Yeah, they did well. It took me 2 sessions to get through. But yeah, it's definitely a good. It's a good, easy, informative read.
Yeah,
And I did
yeah,
enjoy. There was little moments of humor, and I don't know if everybody like there's certain circumstances, like there's one where one of the mums is pulling the little kids by the ear in the background, and I was like, oh, I remember that. My mum would do that to me,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
shot up real tall, and that's the only thing where she could get my attention for when I was doing something wrong. And then there was one a guy gets attacked by a magpie, and
yeah, yeah.
I just recently got attacked by a magpie, so
Oh no.
I just found it amusing. He was just doing his job, and then magpie. I was like, yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you got to put things in a book like this. Like it's a history. It's a social history of a war memorial, which on at face value that sounds like a pretty grim, solemn,
The least
very
humorous thing
good.
you kind of would, I was not expecting to go in finding myself having a laugh, but I did.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to try and strike a balance with that because, well, for one thing, I actually don't think that all those Anzacs who went off and fought in the First World War, they weren't completely serious and solemn. They, in fact, I know that they weren't. So, the grief that Australia collectively experienced, the grief and the disruption that Australia experienced after the First World War and after the Second World War and other conflicts that we've been involved in. Um, people are human beings, and they find ways to assert themselves in the face of those big overwhelming experiences, and sometimes it's a moment of laughter. So it was important to me to just put a bit of light and shade into the book, and sometimes I think I might have underestimated the seriousness of it, but there are a lot of books about military history that don't, so that's fine.
I think you struck out of a very good balance with it between the historical importance, how it affected people's lives for generations, and then just adding those bits of levity throughout. I mean, it makes it a much better read. Like you get more invested, you understand like even though these people, something I couldn't experience in, say, the 1920s or 30s, but what that mum pulling that kid's ear is something that I can relate to. Even just going to like when the gentleman was walking through and talking about all the monument designs as well. I mean, it'd be very similar, but today it would probably be on TV or on YouTube or social media. It's just
Yeah,
the
yeah,
medium might have, the way that information gets out might have changed, but the medium is still
yeah.
there.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's a great example too, because in that chapter, which, as you've said, is about the design, the exhibition of the design competition that was held in Melbourne in 1924, where architects put in their designs for the winner to be chosen for the State War Memorial to be built. So and I've drawn it with this guy, breaking the fourth wall and talking us through the exhibition and giving all his, highfalutin, opinionated opinions, and interacting with other visitors to the exhibition. But pretty much everything that he says in that chapter comes from the review that the real guy wrote and published in an art magazine about that exhibition, and I just loved his voice. Like, you know, it really spoke to me across the decades, and I thought for a long time about how to do that chapter, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to quote that guy's words because I can't improve on them.
No, they're very good. I remember reading it, and even in my mind, the voice spoke like a highfalutin art critic, like
Yeah,
almost cartoonishly, but
yeah,
I enjoyed that voice in my head as he was explaining it to
yeah,
everybody.
yeah. And you're right. He's just like some sort of pompous, you know, cultural program host on television or something. He's just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. People don't change that much, I don't think,
No, it's
over
just I
time.
would
Yeah,
have that separation where I'd be sitting it on TV where the guy would literally probably be right there. You're like, I'm just trying to look at this, mate. You don't need to like give me your criticism.
yeah. That's it. Yep.
It sounds like it went like exceptionally well for you. Like 3.5 years to get it done. That's just well done. Like it almost
Thanks.
feels like you did a speed run of it um to get it to that point. That's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I worked on it pretty much every day. Yeah, even when I went to Finland for a month, I brought it with me and worked on it then. Yeah, so yeah,
Did
thanks.
you have
I
a
really,
like whole dedicated travel bag of art supplies that you had to take with you?
yeah, wasn't that big because it's you know it's just A4 pages and watercolor, so it wasn't that much stuff I needed to take with me. It didn't take up too much room in the suitcase. I was still able to cram a whole lot of Finland op shop purchases
Nice.
in the case. Yeah, but yeah, so I did work on it pretty consistently, and I was very lucky to have a partner who was happy to, you know, crack the whip a little bit and also to cook dinner for me pretty regularly. So my social life did suffer, though, I must say. So you got to be careful when you're working on a graphic novel, I think, not to become completely isolated from the human race.
Yes. It's something, yeah. Like, it's
Yeah,
difficult though because you
unless
get
that's what you want, unless that's how you want it to be, which is fine. Yeah.
oh nah, you got to go out and see people every once in a while just to get away from it. I imagine did this project like take up all your free thinking space even when you weren't like thinking about it? Like you're trying to go to bed, you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe I did this or changed that. Like, did
Yeah.
it all? Yep, it was always
Yes.
hanging around.
Sadly, yes. Sadly, yes. Yes, I haven't watched TV for 3 years, um, except Alone. I loved Alone. I would watch Alone. Um, but yeah, and I feel sorry for the people around me who had to listen to me talk about this book for a long time. But yeah, they'll have to listen to me talk about the next one now. So sucks to be them, I guess.
Oh, I imagine they would tell you they're your friends. They'd be like, "We don't need to hear anymore. We have to just wait for it to come out so I can read it."
Yeah,
Did any
yeah.
of them ever give you like some good like feedback or insight though when you were chatting to them? They're like,
Well, my partner David did give me really terrific feedback often on drafts and on you know, ideas about different ways of presenting things. So that was really terrific. In the later sections of the book, you know, as it comes closer to the present day, some of those stories involved people who are still living, and so or relatives of people, you know, relatives of people who are represented in the book, and so those people often gave me really good, interesting things to think about and feedback. And after a while, I sent out an almost completed manuscript to a few different people for feedback, and so I got some really good suggestions off them as well. So yeah, a lot of people helped me with it. Yeah, yeah, but yeah, in terms of friends, I mean, I did use social media to keep me going. I would post little snippets or rough drawings or whatever on an Instagram account that I set up specifically for this, so that my friends didn't have to be, bored witless by it if they didn't want to see it. And sometimes the reactions that people had showed me that I hadn't drawn something clearly, or that the language that I'd used just wasn't conveying the story. So it was a bit of a lab as well. It was good.
It's good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Was it like, I know a lot of creators have talked that having the social media aspect of it can be a bit of a chore. Like they kind of have to do it, but they don't really always like doing it. Did you find that it was a chore, or something you did as soon as you were getting positive feedback that was helpful? Was it something you engaged in more often?
Yeah, I did engage in it pretty often, and I didn't find it a chore. Like I said before, I know myself well enough to know that in order to keep motivated through a long project like this, one of the things that I need is just that structural little bits of recognition and acknowledgement that people get what you're doing. And so, I'm lucky to have, not a huge number of people, 50 to 100, I guess, who were happy to follow that social media account and do that, perform that service for me. It was really valuable. I didn't find it a chore at all, but it's not the kind of clean, tidy promotional social media. It was much more like workshopping things in a writers group or something like that. So, or going to a residency and working with other people who are also figuring out how to shape a story. It was much more in that realm. Yeah,
That's good. So having a smaller amount of followers that were more engaged definitely sounded like it was a better outcome for you. Where I imagine some of the bigger ones where they got a larger audience that might just be casually glancing at it as they go through all their other ones, aren't really giving as much like helpful feedback.
Yeah, I do follow some comics artists whose work I really enjoy. I do follow some of those who've got social media accounts. I follow them, and I think it would be hard work to run those kinds of accounts with thousands of followers and have to engage with their comments, I guess, or not. I think that'd be tough. Yeah.
Do you have any particular artists that you would recommend for following on social media?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend not so much a comics maker in terms of narrative, sequential, multimodal narratives, but someone who makes really beautiful drawings rooted in place, that there is a story to them. Is a Melbourne artist, and the account on Instagram is called Merry Creek Musings, MERRI Creek Musings. And I don't know this person, but what I think they are doing is like the type of book that's not bound with a spine, but that's like just a long piece of paper that you fold out, like Joe Sacco's First World War book. That's just a narrative about this creek in the inner north of Melbourne, and what people do as they walk along, and the animals and the plants and the trees and the buildings. And they're just really beautiful drawings, kind of like a little bit retro, like harking back to, I guess, British book illustration of the late 20th century, I guess I'll put it that way. So I think
like really highly detailed.
No, they're quite loose, actually. Yeah, they're pen and ink and watercolor. They're really great. I love them. They're really spontaneous and lovely. Yeah. I also, guilty pleasure, I really like Simon Hanselman, and I don't think I'm going to recommend Simon Hanselman to anyone because they're very challenging, because they're quite gross, like depressing and sad, but something about the way but he puts together a story. I just think it's, he's very gifted. And, that incredibly seedy, quite disgusting aesthetic. And as a child of the 70s, the way he uses Jan Pinkowski's Megan Mogg, like it still gives me a little thrill of shock every now and then. So he doesn't post new work online, but he does post essentially strips, which are really good. Yeah.
Well, very two opposite ends of the spectrum by the sound of it.
Totally. Although they both have in common that quite handmade, painterly aesthetic, I'll say. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
As we do get to the end, we do, besides the social media one, we do ask our guests if they would be able to recommend 3 comics or graphic novels or manga. That could be titles that influenced you as a creator or influenced your work that you might have read recently.
Okay. Well, I've got a little pile here. So
Nice.
I didn't know you were going to ask for 3. So I'm going to pick.
I don't have to aim for 3. 3 would be nice, but
yeah,
we'll pick what you've got.
I'm going to pick 3. And I'm going to pick things that I haven't seen profiled on recent creator chats. One of them is the collected Kate Beaton ducks. So I have seen this in my local library. Kate Beaton, who did Hark a Vagrant webcomic. This is a fantastic, fantastic book. It's about her experiences working on oil rigs in Newfoundland, and it's just mind-blowingly good. If a bit hurtful in the sense that the starkness of, I guess, the harsh life that Canadian workers have on those big oil drilling extractive projects is pretty hard stuff, but it's a great book.
No, it's an exceptionally good book. I enjoyed Hark a Vagrant. I actually own that book, so it was a very dramatic kind of swap from. I was very humorous, and this one was much more grounded in reality. Yeah, it had some real genuinely dark moments that it took me I kept thinking about that book after I'd finished it. I finished it and I had to think about the moments in it, and I was like, did I misinterpret that? Or it was. I picked it up because it had got a lot of good reviews for that. But yeah, I was genuinely very surprised and blown away by it. She really put herself out there for it.
Yeah, that's right. I agree completely. So this is super old school. Now, I was thinking about what comics I liked as a child, and we had a number of Michael Lunig's anthologies in the house when I was a kid. Now, Lunig became, he sort of disappointed us all. He became sort of, ultra conservative in some ways, but his early work, God, it's just so funny. It is so funny. He's a genius, really. And just the way he defined an Australian visual comics aesthetic before, I suppose, there was much of a comics underground in Australia. God, he's just so good. I'm going to take this one away and just enjoy looking at it again, I think. And I always thought, when I was a little kid, I just thought this was the funniest book title ever, Ramming the Shears. It's pretty awful, really. Anyway. Yeah. So Lunig. And third one, I'm going to pick up What It Is by Linda Barry.
I've had this on my want to read list.
I actually bought this book at one of those shopping centre discount book retailers. I saw it there. It was marked down to $10. I bought 6 copies and I given them all away except this one to friends, because to me, Linda Barry, again, I just think the aesthetics just what I want. It's just the kind of book I want to see and read. But as someone who is so practiced and skilled at breaking down all of that horrible inner voice that we've all got under capitalism that tells us that we aren't creative, or the work that we want to do, isn't right. That sort of crippling self-consciousness. I just think she's a bit of a saint for the work that she's done in that area. So that's my third.
Those are
Linda
excellent
Barry.
choices. I'm kind of jealous you got that one for so cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've wanted to read it for exactly that. I do have that little niche genre of books about like overcoming creative pressure that I really, when you find a really good one, or one that a lot of people have talked about, I'm like, I've got to read that. I've got to find out if I can get some insight, or just, most of the time I feel like I'm going in there trying to find some insight from it, but more being able to experience what their journey is and how they might have overcome it, or they never overcome it. They always just find like tools to help them.
Yeah, that's right. It's a process. It's always a journey. You never get there. She's on the socials as well, so she's got good tips too. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us this evening. Once again, I appreciate you lending me a copy of Making the Shrine and giving me a chance to read it, and then having a wonderful evening chat about it. And hope it goes well for you and we get to do another one down the track.
Yeah, in 3 years' time. Thanks very much, Luke. Thanks
That's
for
all
having
right.
me. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.